Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well. So you've asked me to do a video comparing IL-2 versus DCS World. So I haven't been looking forward to this, but let's just get on with it. Well, in fact, the first most important thing to say is that they're not really opponents. They don't actually really compete in any field. There's no actual overlap between what IL-2 Sturmovik series is and what the DCS series is. Even in that rough area that they share of World War II aircraft, the only World War II aircraft in DCS are high fidelity models, and the only available in IL-2 are low fidelity models. So even that, there's no actual crossover. But this is what you want, so we're going to do our best anyway. So DCS is a flight simulator, as you all know by now. It started in 1995, and it's been constantly developed for the last 26 years until what we have now. So what we have available to use now, 2019, is one free of charge map, 3 purchasable maps. We've got 2 free aircraft, one high fidelity, one low fidelity, and this bunch of aircraft, we've got around 30 aircraft modules that we can buy. Most of them are high fidelity, some are low fidelity, and some of those modules have sub-aircraft variants. So nearer 40 actual flyable aircraft. IL-2, also a flight simulator, started 2001. Now in 2019 has several different maps that we can use. We can access various maps just by buying the latest version of the game, but there are circumstances like I believe in multiplayer where you can only access the map that you have actually bought. Regarding flyable planes at the moment, we've just Sly's done this spreadsheet and he's listed out about 38 flyable aircraft at the moment, and there may well be more. I'm not sure this is comprehensive, but we can say roughly about the same amount. And that's pretty much all the games have in common. The DCS in 1995 started as modern flight simulations, so flankers, MiG-29s and whatnot, and throughout the 26 years has expanded so that it features all the way from World War II all the way up to almost up to contemporary, kind of the year 2000 and just above. And to differ itself from the opposition, DCS went along the lines of developing aircraft to be high fidelity. So a high fidelity aircraft is a module or an aircraft that's very highly developed in that all of the switches, the buttons, the rheostats, the lights, everything from the real life cockpit is modelled in there. You can actually touch those with your virtual hand, either with your mouse, or if you have VR gloves and whatnot, you can interact with all those knobs and controls, etc. that way. As well as that, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes aircraft systems that are modelled, your hydraulic systems, and your air systems, and your oxygen systems, and stuff like that. So in an aircraft simulator, that's what we would define as a high-fidelity module. As a low-fidelity module, we would describe an aircraft where we could not control all of these systems in a cockpit. We could not turn the knobs and press the dials, and there would be less interactivity and systems modelled in the aircraft in general. And there are some retaining low fidelity modules in DCS World, A10A, SU-25, F-15, SU-27, MiG-29, but the vast majority are the high fidelity. And at this point, I better quickly just emphasise the importance of having those low fidelity modules in DCS to get people into DCSs. DCS is a very, very complex simulator, and it's really good, and it would be nice to have more of those low fidelity aircraft to help get people into it, but that's another matter. And with DCS relevant to World War II, we've got some planes. We've got now 6 high fidelity World War II aircraft that we can fly, 1 dedicated map, although we can fly these World War II planes on the other maps, and we have a ground asset pack where we can include various World War II tanks and AAA guns and stuff like that. So if we scroll all the way back to 1995 and 2001, at that point DCS was modern aircraft only, so IL-2 came in to cover the World War II side of things. Remember that DCS had no World War II functionality at that point at all. So the IL-2 came in to cover that gap. And rather than going for high fidelity, ultra detailed models, they went for lower fidelity models, a bit like the lower fidelity modules that are explained in DCS World, F-15, SU-27, with non-interactive cockpits, and went and stayed along that basis. So still, they are all low fidelity modules in IL-2. In terms of how you purchase different things, generally per plane it's a lot cheaper to play IL-2. So the way you would buy things is you would buy the game, Battle of Stalingrad for instance, Battle of Moscow, Battle of Kuban, I think there's a whole load more as well, like there's the Cliffs of Dover I've got. And those purchases cost about $50, and with them you get a handful of aircraft that you can fly. And as well as that, you can spend an extra bit of money, I think it's about $20, and you can get an extra couple of premium planes to add on to that game if you like. In DCS, everything is bought differently. So apart from the Flaming Cliffs pack, the Flaming Cliffs pack buys you all of these aircraft, for instance. That one there. But apart from that, generally speaking, they're all separate modules that you buy. So you would buy your Persian Gulf map, and you want to go flying, you'd buy then your Albatross, and you would buy your Spitfire to go and fly on your Persian Gulf map. So they work very differently in that case. The price effectively per plane is a lot higher in DCS because you're going to pay, well, anywhere between $10 up to $70 for one of the high fidelity planes in DCS. But that said, you can't really compare a high fidelity plane in DCS to a low fidelity plane in IL-2. And it really is a case you get much more in a high fidelity module in DCS than you do in a low fidelity module in, well, either DCS or IL-2. So those prices aren't really comparable. In terms of what's possible, modes of gameplay if you like, both have a basic single player where you can go and run a one-off map or a one-off mission. Both have campaign type single player missions where you run one mission after the other, you accrue points or credits or whatever it is, currency, rankings. Both have comprehensive mission editor where you can generate single player missions and you can generate multiplayer missions. Both have multiplayer facilities, so someone out there in the ether will host a server on DCS or in IL-2 and you can go and join that server. Both simulators or games are very configurable. You can configure all sorts of options in both. I'm not going to even touch on that because there's just so much, especially in DCS world. Hell of a lot of stuff you can configure in terms of gameplay, but I guess sounds and graphics as well. So that describes both simulators, roughly what you get and what's available to do. And now to the business of actually comparing them. So IL-2 is World War II only, and it does that very well. There's lots of stuff in there, lots of ground units, lots of aircraft, lots of bases. So World War II is what it does, and it does it really well. DCS is much bigger. Like I said, it covers World War II all the way up to contemporary. So there's a lot of stuff in there, lots of modern systems, radars, jammers, a whole bunch of stuff that is the main bread and butter of DCS that isn't even looked at all in IL-2. So the World War II feature of DCS, 6 aircraft and a module of ground units, is very small in terms of scale, size and functionality compared to what IL-2 has covering that same period in history. So if you're looking for functionality specifically in World War II, then you're going to be an IL-2 man. Otherwise, it's DCS for you. Both simulators have top-of-the-line graphics. You can't really pick between them. They're both pretty awesome. I just prefer the graphics in DCS myself a little bit, but some of the guys prefer IL-2, so I think we can treat them as pretty much the same. Sounds, I prefer DCS. I think they're a bit more in-depth and a bit more balanced. Whereas, for instance, the external sounds in IL-2 are a lot quieter. And I can't find any obvious way in IL-2 of changing the mix of various sounds like you can in DCS. I stand to be corrected, but I haven't found anything. So the main difference between the two simulators, where they do crossover, is the quality of the flight model. Now, this is really hard for me to quantify. I've just done a whole load of reviews of different modules in DCS, and trying to explain to someone who doesn't have this module what the flight model is like to fly is very difficult. But once you've flown enough simulators, you know what's good, you know what's immersive, and you know what's not. And IL-2, if you came from nowhere, if you hadn't come from a DCS background and you went into IL-2 and you flew the planes around, the flight models would seem very good, very authentic, very immersive. I don't think you'd have any real problems with them. The planes do pretty much, what you expect the real plane to do. Now, the problem is if you come from DCS like me, where you've been spoilt with the really top-of-the-line flight models in DCS, when you come down to the IL-2 standard of flight model, you can really tell the difference. And it's much less authentic, all of the flight models that I've flown in IL-2, than DCS. And again, I can't quantify that in any way. It's just something you know. You can just really feel that quality. And I'm sure many of you sim heads out there that have bounced between various simulators over the years will know what I'm getting at. And so the way that IL-2 fits into the scheme of things for me is that the DCS is the main meat and potatoes of what I do. It covers everything and it does it really well, and it's got some really, top of the range flight models. IL-2 although it is a flight simulator, it's much more towards being what I would call a game than a flight simulator. It seems to be based a bit more on fun than realism. And so IL-2 just fills that gap that DCS is missing, especially in the World War II area of just low fidelity, have fun, don't worry about it too much, more kind of gamey type sim. So a typical week for me would be doing, 3 hardcore, heavy simulation, super realistic campaign missions in DCS. And then to wind down at the end of the week or on the Thursday, we do IL-2 just to relax, to shoot some Messerschmitts down, not worry about things being too realistic, and just have some fun. And neither attitude is wrong. If you want super simulation, then it's DCS. If you want, it's still good. I'm not saying it's a cartoon. It's still good. It is still a flight simulator, but just a bit more on the fun side, fun orientated, then it's IL-2. So I guess we need a summary. It's been a weird video, and again, I can't really compare them because they don't overlap anywhere. But if you want a game that's just easier to get into, it's World War II only, it's less on the pricey side. If the scale of what you want tips a bit more towards fun and not so much towards super realistic, then IL-2 is your man. If, on the other hand, you want that full fidelity, clickable cockpit, which is completely worth it, and the ultra realism and all of the background systems, and you want to fly any period of aircraft, and you're willing to put the work in, is another thing. If you're going to go high fidelity aircraft, you can't just slap away on a keyboard and hope to learn it in a few minutes. It takes a lot of study to learn a high fidelity aircraft. It's basically the same as flying the real aircraft. Then obviously DCS is the way to go. Like I said, there's always the low fidelity modules in DCS that allow you to, as a stepping stone, to work your way up. Hope that was useful, and see you later.